And welcome to this video on methods of monitoring performance in higher PE. Today we're going to talk about different methods of monitoring, and you'll remember from previous videos that monitoring is all about checking for progress during your PDP. Now, regardless of whatever factor you're trying to improve, you're constantly going to monitor each week, each session to check and see if your program is working, and this will take place during the PDP. Remember, when we are evaluating, that takes place at the end of the PDP. And today we're going to focus on some different ways in which you can check to see if your PDP is working and then how you might make some adaptations. So, methods of monitoring. There's 4 main methods of monitoring that you're going to learn about during your higher PE course this year: the training diary, retesting, video comparisons, and checking goals. So we're going to look at each of these in turn, and the first one we're going to talk about is the training diary. Now, the training diary is basically where you would fill out a diary or a booklet. We'll have completed this year by completing an online Google form, and on that Google form you would be asked to put in what was the name, what was your name, what was the date of the session, what time did the session take place, and what was the location, i.e. what activity did you do. What was the plan of the session? What was the aims of the session? What did you do? What did you actually complete during that session? So if you were working on your overhead clear using repetition drills and you were trying to get side on and hit the shuttle at its highest point and transfer your weight, that's all the sort of stuff that you would have to write down. You would then record how your training session went. So what went well? Was there any feedback from your coach that you were given about how you were progressing during that session? You would also write down how you felt. It's important to take a note of your own personal thoughts and feelings, and you would then record any data or stats. So using the overhead clear example, you would write, I managed to hit 15 shuttles into the back tram lines out of 20, and over time we can check to see if that number is increasing or decreasing. If that was to do with a fitness program, the sort of stats that you would want to record was how long did you manage to run for, how far did you manage to run, and then also having a little look at our heart rate. How much time did we spend in our training zone? So here's an example of a training diary entry from a particular higher PE candidate. So they did this session on the 19th of February at 7:30 in the morning. There's a plan of what they did. Then there's actually how much work did they get through. Then how did they feel? So they felt good for 20 minutes, and then gradually they started to feel a bit tired, and their legs were a bit sort of slippy because of the surface that they were running on. And then next steps, what they're going to do, well, they're going to change the route that they run on so that they're able to run at a more confident and good pace. Here's an example of a training diary that I filled out when I was training for a half marathon. So you can see here the number of runs that I did, the dates that I carried them out, whether they were outside or whether they were indoors on the treadmill, how far I ran in terms of distance in miles and in kilometres, and then the time, how far did I run for, and then the average pace. And it was important to track the average pace because over time I could make judgments about, am I getting faster and am I getting fitter if my pace is starting to come down. Other things you would want to include here was how you felt, and then also any coach feedback if you were working with a coach. And just lastly, on training diary, you can see the Google form that we would have filled out in class here. So this was one for after our swimming fitness program. So what was the aim of the session? What approaches did we use? Was it continuous training? Was it interval training? How long did we swim for? So how long did we work for? How much distance did you manage to cover in that time? So how many lengths did you do? How far did you swim? How did you feel during it? Did you feel pretty rubbish? Did you feel good for 20 minutes and then fade towards the end? And then what are your next steps? What are your future goals? What are your next targets for the next session? And we can see whether or not you've met those at the end of the next session. Right, we're now going to talk about retesting as a second method of monitoring. And remember, when we're retesting, you need to keep your baseline results from week 1 of your PDP. Now, you'll have completed some sort of test regardless of what factor it was for, and you're going to keep this safe so that we can compare back to this result in future. So, for example, if I was doing a fitness program in week 1, I'm going to complete a 20-meter bleep test, and I need to keep my initial score. So if, for example, my initial score was 10.1, I need to keep that safe because over the next few weeks I'm going to recomplete a bleep test using the same test conditions, so using the 20-meter track. Ideally, if you did it inside, you would then want to retest inside at the same time of day. It's a bit like reconducting a science experiment that you'll have done at school. You want to make sure that you keep all the variables the exact same so that it's not going to affect the results. It's really important to note here with retesting. Retesting can be used as a method of monitoring if it takes place in the middle of your PDP, and it can also be used as a method of evaluating when it takes place at the end of your PDP. We're now going to start to look at some examples of retesting, and the first example we're going to look at is from physical fitness. So this person's been conducting a CRE program, and you can see there that their initial baseline result, their initial bleep test was 10.2. In week 5, they then improved that score by recompleting the bleep test, and they've improved their score up to 11.1. And at the end of their program, when they were evaluating, they've done the bleep test again for a third time, and you can see that their score is 11.9. So we can make some judgments that we have managed to improve our level of CRE through retesting. Moving on now to look at retesting or recompleting a PPW again, this time for the social factor. So this person had scored himself a 3 out of 10 in their initial baseline PPW result. And then in week 3, they're still scoring a 3 out of 10. So we're monitoring and seeing if the team building games and the activities that we're doing in training are having an effect. Then in week 5, we've improved that score up to a 4. Week 7, we've improved it up to a 5. And then we've seen quite a big increase at week 10, where we've actually taken our communication up to a 7 out of 10, which is a good score. So we can see that week by week, we're starting to slowly improve up to a 7 at the end of our PDP. And lastly, we're going to look at a program for the emotional factor. So you can see here, this person's SCAT test score is actually coming down. So it was quite a high level of anxiety at the start of the program. We were at 22. Again, in week 3, when we recompleted the SCAT test under the same conditions, it was 22 again. Then it's slowly starting to decrease, 21, 19, and eventually at the end of our emotional PDP to try and reduce our anxiety levels, we managed to get it down to 17, which is a great result in that period of time. We're now going to go and talk about video comparisons. Now, it's really important to note here that training diary and retesting can be used for any factor, and that's why I would recommend that you write about these in your higher PE exam. But it's also important that you have a little bit of an understanding about video comparisons. Now, video comparisons can only be used for physical skills. It can only be used to compare you performing a certain skill. So let's be clear on that. So video comparisons, as you can see here, this is 2 different videos of me performing a layup. One would be from the start of my program, and one would be either halfway through or after a couple of weeks. I would then refilm myself, ideally from the same angle, so that I can compare myself performing a skill. Now, what you can do with this video is you can keep it and keep it safe so that you can compare back to it. You can also pause it and rewind it, and it'll allow you to get some visual feedback that you maybe couldn't see when your coach was telling you a bit about it, because it gives you a chance to view yourself. But you can also compare yourself to a model performer. So what I could do is highlight a model performer from basketball, and I could compare my technique to them. And it'll help you to work out things that you need to improve within your own technique, and it allows you to see yourself in the third person. It could also be that you then compare yourself to somebody else. This could be a teammate, it could be a training partner, or as we said, it could be a model performer. So we're now going to look at describing a method of monitoring. Now this is actually very similar to describing a method of gathering data or gathering information question. How it differs is how you're going to write this answer at the start. You must make reference to a comparison between results, and ideally you want to tell us what weeks the monitoring process took place. And as you can see on screen here, this is an example of a retesting description for the mental factor, and this person has said that they monitored their progress within the mental factor in week 5, where they recompleted a PPW and they compared the results to week 1. And they've then gone into a full description about how to complete a PPW, what it is, what it looks like, and then how the scores might differ from week 1 to week 5. Hope you found this video useful on methods of monitoring. Thanks for watching.